so hard. Now everything is easy 'cause of you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Thoughts for Rent, Realtors Keeping It Real. I am Ireland, and this is
Jenni McKenna, owner-broker of McKenna Property Management right here in Las Vegas, Nevada.
I know, and we're finally starting to see some fall weather come in. It's a relief. No longer 115 degrees outside anymore, which is nice.
So it's only 105. She goes from 115 down to 105. But no, I agree with you. It does, when you have that 10-degree difference, it does start feeling like a season change, which is always nice to have here in Vegas.
It's always fun. We may not have all 4 seasons, but we definitely have a decent enough season change in the fall that it feels pretty good. And everything starts to change. You get all the Halloween decorations out, and you get all the fall flavors and everything. So
I think what she's really trying to say is she's looking forward to Starbucks pumpkin spice latte.
Always.
Oh my
pumpkin spice, but I always like their Christmas collection more. So I'm actually just waiting for that.
Well, and I got to sit down with a team member a couple days ago, and we are going over what we're going to be doing for our Boo Bash. So that's always fun too.
Yeah.
Because McKenna Property Management, we like to contribute to the community. And raising 3 kids, I always felt like, there were places to go to trick or treat, but I always was just a little weirded out on going into neighborhoods. So if I could find a trunk or treat or like a church event, something where I felt better for you guys for safety. So what we did is McKenna Property Management, we host annually our Sweet Trail, which is SUITE trail. But we give out a lot of sweets, SWEETS. Yes. So it's called the Boo Bash, and we're going to be doing it right here on Halloween, and we're already preparing for it and super excited as we do some of the podcasts with the decorations up. That'll be kind of fun. So yeah, it does. It feels like we're getting into fall and feeling good. And so what do we want to talk about today, Ireland?
Well, I feel like we've talked a lot about kind of more so my side of things, which might be resident oriented. So we've talked a lot about HOAs, vendors, repairs, the application process, things of that nature. But we haven't really gotten a chance to talk about what it might look like for an owner if they're interested in using a property manager, and kind of what that looks like if you have an investment and you're wanting to onboard with a company.
Yeah, because I do think that there's a lot of questions that they might have on what would be their responsibility, how much should they be involved in everything. And then I think that the obstacle that we've been seeing lately is we've had properties where they've been on the market for sale, and the market is not as strong in the real estate side for sales and listings as it was a couple years ago. So they pop it on the market for sale for a few months. When it doesn't get the price that they want, or they don't want to compromise on that price, then the other option is, which is a great option, rent it out. Rent it out until the market turns. When we've been getting those properties, Ireland, they're not in rent-ready condition. And it surprises the owners because they're like, well, hold on. I've had this property on the market for sale for 3 months, but then you pop in, you do your walkthrough, and now I've got a laundry list of 6 or 7 things that need to get done. And I think the best way to explain that is a for sale listing is a different buyer or a different set of eyes than it would be for a renter who's moving into the property.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm an owner who has an investment and gets your contact information, what does it look like from the time that I would call in?
So the first call in would obviously be, they always want to know, what do you think my property is going to go on the market for? So there's a rent analysis done, sight unseen. So that's all data. We, of course, would want to adjust that once we get to the property. But this gives you at least a starting point. And then that starting point, if they're still wanting to move forward, then we will set up a time where we can physically go see the property. If they're out of town, we get a key. If they're in town, sometimes they like to meet us. Either way, the idea is let's get eyes on the property so our expertise will be able to tell that owner what needs to be done.
So you guys here at McKenna, you would be willing to go to a property without any kind of contract being signed? Like you wouldn't need anything up front or anything required in order to view the home in person?
Well, actually, that's not true. Good point. After we've discussed the basic the amount or the rent range, let's say, we've gone over all the details of what they're going to pay for a site evaluation once a year. They also know about our fees as far as when the first resident moves in, and then whatever our management fee is that we've determined. Then we send that out. If they sign that, that is when we go boots on the ground. We used to do it the other way, to be totally honest. I used to go to every property whenever anybody wanted me to. And then I realized that sometimes that's not the best use of my time. So now we want to make sure all the terms work within the budget of that particular owner. They can do a DocuSign for the property management agreement with a caveat. And the caveat is if I walk your property and you don't want to do all the things that I'm asking you to do, we will rip up the contract. You're not going to be held to that contract. I just don't want to be going out and looking at a property and putting estimates together, involving a handyman that goes and looks at the property unless I feel pretty confident that that owner and I are on the same team.
That makes sense. So you give the owner a rough data estimate of what the rent might be.
Mm-hmm.
As long as both parties are in agreement, this contract is signed. And then you go to the property and you get your boots on the ground idea. Most of the time, do you find yourself adjusting from the original data amounts, or do you feel like it stays pretty consistent?
It stays pretty consistent. The only thing that's going to make that number adjust is if every house next to the subject property has abandoned cars in the front yard or dead landscaping. Or if I go to the property and the backside of the property, it's just a big old 2-story with a balcony that looks right into the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
It would be things that I know of that would affect a renter or a resident putting in an application. And so therefore we may have to adjust the rental amount. The good news though, compared to when you're selling a property, when you list a property and if that property is listed at a certain number and you're just not getting any hits on it, your listing agent is usually going to ask you for like maybe a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 adjustment. When it comes to rentals, a $20 adjustment is big. You don't think it, but it really is. When we've done rent adjustments for properties that have been on the market for 14 days and we're just not seeing the activity that we want, if I just adjust it $20, $25, makes a big difference in the rental world. So that big 2-story with the balcony that was looking into the backyard, on my rent range, I would just go a little more to the lower side of the rent range and not the higher side of the rent range. So to answer your question, it really doesn't adjust that much.
And then when you do walk a new property for the first time, what do you feel like are some of the more common items on that list of things that would need to get done to be rent ready?
I think the hardest thing for an owner to swallow is a full paint, because they're going to look at a property and they're going to see some dirt or scuffs on the walls and they're going to be like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. And technically it's really not that big of a deal if it's only a few places. But what you really find is you're going to have a few on this wall and a few on this wall and a few on this wall. And then by the time you're halfway through the walk, you got too much. And touch-up paint can sometimes be more expensive if it's major than if you just did a full paint, because it's easier. You can get in, you can do it quicker. You don't really need a specialist. So I think that that's where probably the hardest conversations I have with owners is when they're like, the walls are pretty good, Jenny. Why do I have to do a full paint? But the reality is a full paint's going to get you a better resident.
Anything else that's common on that list, or is it just the paint?
Curb appeal. I am a huge believer, and this is after 33 years of being in the business. You are going to make your first impression and you're never going to make a second first impression. You are going to want that walk up to that front door to look good. You are going to want it to be debris free. You are going to want the door to be nicely painted. You are going to want to make sure that while that agent is going to get the key from the lockbox, wherever that lockbox is, that that person standing in front of that door can already start envisioning them living there. And so, yes, the inside is important, but you win at the front door.
Okay. So those are curb appeal, paint. Those are probably the most common things.
Yeah, you're always going to have the flooring issue. I am a believer that carpet cleaning does a lot. And when you've got a good carpet cleaner, he can salvage a lot of carpet. But if the carpet has already gone through its life expectancy, then carpet is going to be a big factor on making your property look good. A lot of people will go with carpet only in the bedrooms, and I tend to agree to that. I think that if you're going to do any kind of upgrading to a property and you know it's going to be a rental, put either ceramic tile or the plank vinyl flooring, high quality. Don't go super cheap. Don't roll out the vinyl because that's not going to last. But do good flooring in all the common areas, and then those will last the duration of the rental. And then you only have to replace the carpet if you need to in the bedrooms.
That's good. So once you give this list, are owners given an option to do it themselves, or are they given a vendor, or how does it look after the list has been created?
So the list is created, and then it comes with an estimate from a handyman that I've worked with in the past, so a trustworthy handyman. However, if the owner says, I have somebody that can do items 5, 7, and 9, then we just take those items off and they can have their own person do it. And then we would make sure and supervise all the rest of the items on the list. If the owner says, Jenny, guess what? I've got my cousin who's a handyman. I'll give him your list and he can take care of everything. I'll call you back in 7 days. Actually, that is wonderful. That is wonderful because then I don't have to supervise. I don't have to worry about money. I don't have to get a capital contribution. Everything is handled by the owner and it's going to be done to their standards, which is always nice. So the only thing I would have to do after is just make sure that everything on that list got done and to the standard that we need in order to find a good qualified resident.
And you do that through another walkthrough or just through photos?
Through another walkthrough. Yeah, I have to. Photos are not going to tell me everything that we're going to need to know to make sure that it's in rent-ready condition. So there's going to be another walkthrough done. There's also, at our company, we do a turnkey. So we get another set of eyes on it. And that other set of eyes goes through and does an actual site evaluation. And that site evaluation comes with photos. And then that is saved in our software. So it's dated, it's always there. And I think that's a very valuable thing, especially when you're managing property year after year after year. You can really see if there's been deterioration, if we need to upgrade the property, how long has that carpet really been there? And when we got it, what was the condition? So that's called a turnkey inspection. And that lives within the that file, the whole life that we manage the property.
So it sounds like you let your owners be pretty hands-on, or you give them the option to be hands-off, so they get both possibilities. Do you feel like there's a happy medium or a level of involvement that leads to more success than other levels of involvement?
Well, so there's a thought that if you're hiring a professional property manager, let them do what they're good at. Now, that's not to say that some of my owners are not really good at DIY jobs and they might actually really enjoy it. And I don't want to take that away from them. But for the most part, if you are looking to hire a property manager, you don't want the aggravation of getting the property in rent-ready condition. So in that case, I would say it's probably in the best interest of the owner to just let me handle it from start to finish. And then that way it's going to be done to our standards, to what we know is going to help get the property rented quickly. We're going to supervise that vendor and make sure that vendor does a good job. So if they don't love it, then I would say, let me do all of it. But if there is a love and a passion that they want, then by all means, I don't want to take that away from them. But yeah, level involvement, less is probably a little bit more efficient.
Nice. Do you give any advice to someone who is having like a genuine first time investment, or someone who it was the home that they lived in for however many years and now it's becoming a rental? Are there any like one-liners or things that you say when you meet in person for that, or is it like, do you have any advice?
That is a great question. And I do have a quote unquote one liner. If the person has been living in the property, it is a hard thing to disconnect, and they need to. That's no longer their home. They need to look at it as a dollar sign. It's an investment. So what I like to say to them, and this is just something I came up with so many years ago, and I got a chuckle from that individual across from me. And I've always been like, okay, well, they didn't take it really harsh, so maybe I'll just use it. So I've used it. I basically tell them, I need you to cut the umbilical cord. This is no longer your home, your family home. This is your moneymaker. And so you have to make decisions differently, and you have to look at it differently. When it comes to a first time investor, they're disconnected anyways. So they're always just looking at the bottom line. So the conversation that I have with them is all about the money, what we're going to spend, why we're spending it, and why we're going to get this amount of money on the back end. So totally different when you're just an investor. But yeah, if you've been living in the property and now it becomes a rental, cut the umbilical cord.
And if I remember correctly, you do sometimes offer that market analysis even to people who are potentially purchasing the home. So if they're thinking about purchasing it for an investment, you will provide data, even if they haven't made the sale yet, but they're just interested. You'd be willing to do that for them.
I always do that. And the reason I do that, Ireland, is because I think it is my professional service to make sure that that individual is well informed. And so they may be going out and finding a great investment. And quite honestly, the real estate agent is trying to do them a service by telling them, oh, rent's going to be about this. But if that real estate agent is not 100% property manager, they're not going to be able to give the right number. They might get close, but they may not get the right number. So I tell everyone, if you're thinking about buying a property that is going to be an investment property, shoot me the address and I'll be happy to give you what I call a rent market analysis, just so that I can tell you what I'm seeing with the data without seeing the property. I just think it's a good idea to be eyes wide open when you are buying an investment property, and just kind of know what a professional is telling you that property could rent for. And I'll tell you this right now, it's always different. Today is different than what it was 2 years ago on the exact same house. And I'm going to bet my life savings 2 years from now, it will be a different number than what it is today.
Mm-hmm. So if someone already owns the property and maybe it takes like a week to do the to-do list that you've given them, what do you think is like the average turnover between like the time they call and the time it's being advertised as like a property to rent?
So if we're doing the work, you're right. It's about 10 to 14 days probably to do all that work and get it scheduled and completed. But once the work is completed, then it's only about 3 days before we have to put it on the market. By the time we get the marketing photos, the verbiage, we post it to the MLS, we post it to other 64 websites. So that turnaround time is pretty quick. And then the question's going to be, did we get the sweet spot? And the sweet spot is, did we give an opinion of rent that is perfect? Because if you did, you're going to see applications within the first 14 days. But if you didn't, if you're a little too high, then what we're going to need to do is educate the owner and let them know we did an educated guess, a professional opinion, but the market is telling us, basically screaming at us, that we're a little too high. And then we just make those adjustments until we get into the sweet spot. And McKenna Property Management's average right now, days on market, is only a little over 20. So our average days on market is about 23, I think was our last number, before we secure that resident. So I tell my owners, you got to budget for about 45 days of no money coming in from start to finish.
I feel like that's not too bad, especially to go from like a house that you've lived in or a house you just bought to now a full rental.
Yeah. I do know that I'm very, very conscientious about that number. I do not like that number being high. So whatever we can do at McKenna Property Management to make sure that days on market is as low as possible is very important to me. That's why we have a weekly meeting with all of our showing agents. That's why we're always fluffing up verbiage or changing pictures or, putting a different spin on it, because I really think that every day a property sits vacant, in my mind, it's money flying out of my owner's pockets. And that doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you answering all my questions because that's not really something that I am involved in day to day. So it's definitely kind of the other side of the office. There's like the east side and then there's the west wing of the office. And
we're the other side of the railroad tracks. We're the onboarding side.
But if you're an owner who just is scared because they don't even know where to start, this kind of just gives you a little bit of some insight of what it might look like. Maybe just a typical standard situation. So if that doesn't sound too scary, or if you want kind of your hand to be held through the process, then I would say just give us a little shout, give us a reach out, because this is kind of what your first 45 days would look like if you were to turn your property into a rental. So.
And I'm good at holding the hand. I will walk you through it, answer any questions that you might have, because I've been there once and I remembered it was a little scary. And so everything I do is to take that. I like to say, I like to be the aspirin to property management headache. Let me give you that solution so that you no longer have that headache for property management.
I like that. Just giving medication to people.
Figuratively speaking,
yes,
of course.
Metaphorically, yes. Figuratively.
Yes.
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out or feel free to comment or give us a call, and we'll be able to help you with any concerns that you might have.
And if you think somebody would appreciate this episode, feel free to share it. And then also subscribe, because we drop an episode once a week. Thoughts for Rent, Realtors Keeping It Real. We talk about everything under the sun. So there might just be something that interests you. And hopefully our stories keep you going while you're driving or whatever else that you're doing. So remember, Thoughts for Rent, Realtors Keeping It Real. I'm Jenni McKenna with McKenna Property Management.
And I'm Ireland. See you guys later.
Oh, there you go. Sound good? Okay, good. I'll pass over to Ireland. Here you go, Ken.
Thanks, Pops.